Chapter 24 of Mystery of a Hansom Cab by Fergus Hume. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. Brian receives a letter. Notwithstanding the hospitable invitation of Mr. Frettlby, Brian refused to stay at Yabba that night, but after saying good-bye to Madge, mounted his horse and rode slowly away in the moonlight. He felt very happy, and letting the reins lie loose on his horse's neck, he gave himself up unreservedly to his thoughts. Atra Cura certainly did not sit behind the horseman on this night, and Brian, to his surprise, found himself singing Kitty of Coleraine as he rode along in the silver moonlight. And was he not right to sing when the future seemed so bright and pleasant? Oh yes, they would live on the ocean, and she would find how much pleasanter it was on the restless waters, with their solemn sense of mystery, than on the crowded land. Was not the sea made for the free, land of courts and slaves alone? Moore was perfectly right. She would learn that when, with a fair wind, and all sail set, they were flying over the blue Pacific waters. And then they would go home to Ireland, to the ancestral home of the Fitzgeralds, where he would lead her in under the arch, with Céad Míle Fáilte on it, and every one would bless the fair young bride. Why should he trouble himself about the crime of another? No, he had made a resolve, and intended to keep it. He would put this secret with which he had been entrusted behind his back, and would wander about the world with Madge and her father. He felt a sudden chill come over him as he murmured the last words to himself. Her father. "I'm a fool," he said impatiently, as he gathered up the reins, and spurred his horse into a canter. "It can make no difference to me so long as Madge remains ignorant, but to sit beside him, to eat with him, to have him always present like a skeleton at a feast, God help me!" He urged his horse into a gallop, and as he rushed over the turf, with the fresh cool night wind blowing keenly against his face, he felt a sense of relief, as though he were leaving some dark spectre behind. On he galloped, with the blood throbbing in his young veins, over miles of plain, with the dark blue, star-studded sky above, and the pale moon shining down on him. Past a silent shepherd's hut, which stood near a wide creek, splashing through the cool water, which wound through the dark plain like a thread of silver in the moonlight; then again the wide grassy plain, dotted here and there with tall clumps of shadowy trees, and on either side he could see the sheep scurrying away like fantastic spectres; on, ever on, until his own homestead appears, and he sees the star-like light shining brightly in the distance. A long avenue of tall trees, over whose wavering shadows his horse thundered, and then the wide grassy space in front of the house, with the clamorous barking of dogs. A groom, roused by the clatter of hoofs up the avenue, comes round the side of the house, and Brian leaps off his horse, and flinging the reins to the man, walks into his own room. There he finds a lighted lamp, brandy and soda on the table, and a packet of letters and newspapers. He flung his hat on the sofa, and opened the window and door, so as to let in the cool breeze. Then, mixing for himself a glass of brandy and soda, he turned up the lamp, and prepared to read his letters. The first he took up was from a lady. "Always a she correspondent for me," says Isaac Disraeli, "provided she does not cross." Brian's correspondence did not cross, but notwithstanding this, after reading half a page of small talk and scandal, he flung the letter on the table with an impatient ejaculation. The other letters were principally business ones, but the last one proved to be from Calton, and Fitzgerald opened it with a sensation of pleasure. Calton was a capital letter-writer, and his epistles had done much to cheer Fitzgerald in the dismal period which succeeded his acquittal of Whyte's murder, when he was in danger of getting into a morbid state of mind. Brian, therefore, sipped his brandy and soda, and lying back in his chair, prepared to enjoy himself. "My dear Fitzgerald," wrote Calton in his peculiarly clear handwriting, which was such an exception to the usual crabbed hieroglyphics of his brethren of the bar, "while you are enjoying the cool breezes and delightful freshness of the country, here am I, with numerous other poor devils, cooped up in this hot and dusty city. How I wish I were with you in the land of Goshen, by the rolling waters of the Murray, where everything is bright and green, and unsophisticated; the two latter terms are almost identical, instead of which my view is bounded by bricks and mortar, and the muddy waters of the Yarra have to do duty for your noble river. Ah! too long I have lived in Acadia, but I don't now, and even if some power gave me the choice to go back again, I am not sure that I would accept. Arcadia, after all, is a lotus-eating paradise of blissful ignorance, and I love the world with its pomps, vanities, and wickedness. While you, therefore, O Corydon, don't be afraid, I'm not going to quote Virgil, are studying Nature's book, I am deep in the musty leaves of Themis's volume, but I dare say that the Great Mother teaches you much better things than her artificial daughter does me. However, you remember that pithy proverb, when one is in Rome, one must not speak ill of the Pope, so being in the legal profession, I must respect its muse. I suppose when you saw that this letter came from a law office, you wondered what the deuce a lawyer was writing to you for, and my handwriting no doubt suggested a writ. Pshaw! I am wrong there, you are past the age of writs. Not that I hint that you are old, by no means. You are just at that appreciative age when a man enjoys life most, when the fire of youth is tempered by the experience of age, and one knows how to enjoy the utmost good things of this world, viz., love, wine, and friendship. I am afraid I am growing poetical, which is a bad thing for a lawyer, for the flower of poetry cannot flourish in the arid wastes of the law. On reading what I have written, I find I have been as discursive as Praed's vicar, and as this letter is supposed to be a business one, I must deny myself the luxury of following out a train of idle ideas and write sense. I suppose you still hold the secret which Rosanna Moore entrusted with you. Ah, you see I know her name, and why? Simply because, with the natural curiosity of the human race, I have been trying to find out who murdered Oliver Whyte, and as the Argus very cleverly pointed out, Rosanna Moore, as likely to be at the bottom of the whole affair, I have been learning her past history. The secret of Whyte's murder, and the reason for it, is known to you, but you refuse, even in the interest of justice, to reveal it. Why, I don't know, but we all have our little faults, and from an amiable though mistaken sense of, shall I say duty, you refuse to deliver up the man whose cowardly crime so nearly cost you your life. After your departure from Melbourne everyone said, "The hansom cab tragedy is at an end, and the murderer will never be discovered." I ventured to disagree with the wiseacres who made such a remark, and asked myself, who was this woman who died at Mother Guttersnipe's? Receiving no satisfactory answer for myself, I determined to find out, and took steps accordingly. In the first place, I learned from Roger Moreland, who, if you remember, was a witness against you at the trial, that Whyte and Rosanna Moore had come out to Sydney on the John Elder about a year ago as Mr. and Mrs. Whyte. I need hardly say that they did not think it needful to go through the formality of marriage, as such a time might have been found inconvenient on some future occasion. Moreland knew nothing about Rosanna Moore, and advised me to give up the search, as coming from a city like London, it would be difficult to find any one that knew her there. Notwithstanding this, I telegraphed home to a friend of mine, who is a bit of an amateur detective, find out the name and all about the woman who left England on the John Elder on the 21st day of August, 18, as wife of Oliver Whyte. Mirabile dictu, he found out all about her, and knowing as you do what a maelstrom of humanity London is, you must admit my friend was clever. It appears, however, that the task I set him was easier than he expected, for the so-called Mrs. Whyte was rather a notorious individual in her own way. She was a burlesque actress at the Frivolity Theatre in London, and being a very handsome woman, had been photographed innumerable times. Consequently, when she very foolishly went with Whyte to choose a berth on board the boat, she was recognised by the clerks in the office as Rosanna Moore, better known as Musette of the Frivolity. Why she ran away with Whyte I cannot tell you. With reference to men understanding women, I refer you to Balzac's remark anent the same. Perhaps Musette got weary of St. John's Wood and champagne suppers, and longed for the purer air of her native land. Ah! You open your eyes at this latter statement. You are surprised. No, on second thoughts you are not, because she told you herself that she was a native of Sydney, and had gone home in 1858, after a triumphant career of acting in Melbourne. And why did she leave the applauding Melbourne public and the flesh-pots of Egypt? You know this also. She ran away with a rich young squatter, with more money than morals, who happened to be in Melbourne at the time. She seems to have had a weakness for running away. But why she chose Whyte to go with this time puzzles me. He was not rich, not particularly good-looking, had no position, and a bad temper. How do I know all these traits of Mr. Whyte's character, morally and socially? Easily enough. My omniscient friend found them all out. Mr. Whyte was the son of a London tailor, and his father being well off, retired into a private life, and ultimately went the way of all flesh. His son, finding himself with a capital income, and a pretty taste for amusement, cut the shop of his late lamented parent, found out that his family had come over with the Conqueror, Glanville de Whyte helped to sew the Bayeux tapestry, I suppose, and graduated at the Frivolity Theatre as a masher. In common with the other gilded youth of the day, he worshipped at the gas lit shrine of Musette, and the goddess, pleased with his incense, left her other admirers